welcome back. You're listening to the 123 show this afternoon with me, Karen Coe. It is 2:05, and since it's Friday, it's time for our regular Frisky Friday segment, our weekly segment about sex and sexuality. And today we're talking about BDSM and other deviant sexual fantasies. If you don't know what BDSM is, stay tuned. You're going to find out. You're going to learn. And what do these fantasies tell us about ourselves? And is there such a thing as being normal? And we're thrilled to be joined in the studio by registered psychotherapist and chartered psychologist Dr. Esslin Terrighena. Esslin, thank you for coming in. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about BDSM. I think first we have to define it because not everybody knows what it is. So give us a view of what it is. Also, I'll tell people that we're on Facebook Live. So if you go to my Facebook page, Karen on RTHK Radio 3, you can see and hear Esslin there. So here she is. What is BDSM?
So BDSM is somewhat a sexual practice. It's known as a sexual practice, and it's an acronym that stands for bondage and discipline, dominance, submission, and sadomasochism. So what are those things?
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to point out it's obviously a sexual practice that's happening between two consenting adults, so it's all consensual, which I think some people get confused or worried about a little bit because there is a dominant role and there is a submissive role. So it's basically the key of BDSM is power play. Now, it acknowledges the power dynamics in relationships that we have in all relationships, but in BDSM they are defined. So you have a top or a dominant or a dom, and a bottom or a submissive or a sub. The dominant being the one who's in charge, who's taking control, who has the power in that power dynamic, whereas the submissive one is the one who does not have the power,
right,
does not have the control, and consensually submits to the wishes of the dominant partner.
Okay, so the word consent is really important because I think in media and in pop culture, maybe the thing that people associate with BDSM when they hear it is 50 Shades of Grey, the books and the movie, and master and slave kind of relationships. What do you think of those images? Are they really, portraying an inaccurate kind of view of BDSM?
I think it depends a little bit. First of all, you've got the dom and sub role, and you can also switch between those roles. So in a partnership, you don't have to decide on one of those. The thing with those kind of relationships is they don't have to be so extreme. They don't have to be, you're going to be tied up 24/7 in a basement,
right,
and even if you enjoy that, power to you, but that's not really what it's about. It can be very subtle. It can be a very subtle, calm spoken order that can get people excited because the role play has begun, that kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be master slave. Another thing, just to bang on about consent for a second, is that in some of the 50 Shades of Grey scenarios, consent wasn't entirely clear. Now, the BDSM community would not accept that,
right,
would not, rules are very clear, consent is very clear. Some people choose to have a safe word, some people choose to just set certain boundaries, and those boundaries are respected. So if someone says no about something, there's no, oh, but let's try it, and oh, can you do me this favor? That's not quite how it should work. Obviously, in different relationships, different boundaries are maybe pushed. But
so it is a very rule-based set of behaviors, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also about setting the scene. So again, you don't just throw someone into the basement, tie them up and beat them. That's not,
that's not turning anyone on.
Exactly. That's not, it's about setting the scene of that power dynamic, setting the scene of I'm the one in charge and you're the one who's submitting to me, or vice versa. And again, that can be through anything. Of course, also BDSM in the practice does include things like bondage, so ropes. Bondage actually is also about art. So the Japanese have a very artistic way of tying someone up. And again, it's quite rule-based, and they're very particular about that art. So they'll have only one knot, I think it is, per the whole tying up situation.
Really?
Obviously that might be a bit different depending on the practice, but so there's things like that. So that's obviously involved, and then some people use hitting implements, whips, floggers,
right,
and canes, that kind of thing, or tying people up to something. And it's a very versatile community. So it can be anything from just a calm order and someone else executing that order, all the way to pleasure pain games,
right,
and these kind of things. So it's very versatile. It's not just one thing.
So is pain always necessarily involved, or necessarily either a goal or an outcome?
No, I mean, it depends absolutely on what the partners are into. Some people prefer humiliation. Some people prefer pain, or administering pain, or receiving pain. So it doesn't have to be part of it. It typically is for a lot of couples, but it doesn't have to be. So
why do people like BDSM? What are the psychological reasons or emotional, mental reasons?
So it's actually there's been a few studies done that are actually very interesting. The one looking at the dominant part, so that is said that when a dominant partner begins with that role play, they experience something that people call like a mindful flow, an energy flow. It basically just says getting in the zone. And they compare this to athletes when they get in the zone and everything else sort of falls away and they're focused. And it makes a lot of sense, because that's what a dominant partner would be doing. They're focusing on their submissive partner. They're focusing on the body language. It is a couples activity, right? And if it's done in the right, safe, healthy kind of way, both partners will be looking out for each other's feedback. In particular, the dominant partner, who has the control, who has the power for that time, will always be looking out and really focusing on, bringing pleasure to the submissive partner, and making sure that everything's safe and set.
So the dominant partner is really supposed to take care of the submissive partner.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're going to be instrumental to helping the submissive partner enjoy, relax, have that pleasure pain kind of continuum, if you so will. Now, the submissive partner, on the other hand, studies have shown that they go into a stage of what's called, in a really, really sexy way, transient hypofrontality.
Wow.
So here's a bit of neuroscience for you. Which also again has been linked to other things, like going to the gym and really powering yourself out, or going for a really long run. It means that the frontal areas, the executive functioning areas of your brain, they slow down a little bit, and because there's adrenaline, there's endorphins, there's also oxytocin, which is the love hormone, if you so will, which helps with bonding and in the partnership. So all those hormones will lead to that transient hyperfrontality, which can induce a state of peace and calm and just feeling on top of the world, or feeling floaty, that kind of thing.
Wow.
So that's why a submissive partner, I suppose, would be getting into that.
Oh, interesting. So given that emotionally, obviously physically, some people who practice this, it makes them feel good, not just mentally, but hormonally, they're actually getting these feel-good hormones. Why is it so underground and seen as weird or abnormal?
Well, I think everything that's not quite standard and mainstream, and that has a bit of an unclear element to it, naturally becomes a scary thing. In the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, which we use for diagnosis in therapy, it used to be, much like homosexuality, actually, it used to be a disorder.
Okay.
It's been changed now, and there's a section in it that says there are sadism disorders and things like that, but only if if you're hurting someone else, or if you're hurting yourself, or if it's dysfunctional, or if it's affecting your life in a negative way, or that of someone else. But actual BDSM is no longer classified as a disorder. And I think that's just with the moving times, as people understand it better. And also there's more neuroscientific research that shows how the brain responds. It links it to evolution, the act of procreation and the act of taking and things like that. Another thing that science has shown is, in particular for the submissive part, but also for the dominant part, there's a heightening of sensations, right? So if you interact with another human body, you tease it, you give it different kind of sensations, be it gentle, be it painful, be it pressure, any kind of teasing, any anticipation, it keeps heightening the response of the body. Now, of course, if you add pain into that, or a factor of humiliation, the brain recognizes that as a threat, which again heightens the sensations of the body and heightens the sensations for the person. And then ultimately, that then has those very, I suppose, satisfying or gratifying hormones that are released, because the body is so sensitive at that stage. So it's also playing a little bit with our fight-flight system, which can be very interesting. And other people might go and do bungee jumping or jump out of an aeroplane to get a similar kind of transient hyperfrontality as you would during BDSM.
Interesting. Now, we know Hong Kong used to have quite open BDSM scene many years ago, and that was put to an end when the police famously raided this business, which was called Fetish Fashion. And when they raided the business, they found that there was a dungeon party taking place, and everybody got arrested. Then there was a trial, and then all the charges were dismissed. But it really sent everything underground. Do you know whether BDSM is popular in Hong Kong?
I don't actually, to be honest. I know that there are groups. I think one of them, there are get-togethers. Actually, all of the groups that exist do organise get-togethers for like-minded people. For me, from a client perspective, I wouldn't say so much BDSM, but what I have noticed is that with clients, not just in Hong Kong, but all over the world, the clients that I've had, sometimes, they can be in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s even. There's something about shame around fantasies and shame around being allowed to express those fantasies. And a lot of people don't express them, even with their sexual partners, even with their, if they're married and they've been married for years, they still haven't been able to seek that conversation. So I can't really say whether BDSM is particularly popular, but what I do notice is that people don't speak about their sexual fantasies a lot. And BDSM being one of those.
Right. Okay. Well, let's talk a bit more about that, because we're going to talk about deviant sexual fantasies, deviant in inverted commas. But what is deviant and what is normal? Is there such a thing? Studies would probably say no. There's no such thing as deviant, as long as it is between consenting adults and both are happy with the situation. There's been studies done on people who practice BDSM and compared them to a control group who have maybe more a conventional or vanilla sex. And they found, because one of the big myths around BDSM is that you would have had to experience some sort of abuse and that it's all so twisted and things like that. So it's something in your past has caused you to want this.
That's right, yes. Caused you to want to abuse someone or be abused.
Okay.
Which BDSM, because it's so rule-based, is very far from that. But anyways, these studies have compared people who are BDSM practitioners to a control group of vanilla sex people, and they found no difference in their experience of trauma or abuse or childhood trauma or sexual trauma, any of these things. And it was quite a large sample. I think it was well over 10,000. It was a telephone questionnaire. And other studies have been done that have compared BDSM practitioners to control groups in terms of neuroticism, anxiety, depression, openness to new experience, etc. And really, there hasn't been so much of a difference between those groups, with the exception actually that the BDSM practitioners in one specific study were less neurotic and more open to new experiences, which makes sense, right?
Yes, exactly.
So that's neither good nor bad.
They're not ashamed of what they're doing or embarrassed about what they're doing, right?
Yeah, well, in the best case, absolutely, yeah.
It's interesting. I came across a study which was done in Quebec, actually, in 2014, and it was all about trying to research what are people's most common sexual fantasies, and they came up with a list both for men and women, the top 20, and the conclusion of the study was that there are a lot more common fantasies than atypical fantasies. So, for example, for women, having sex in a romantic location like a deserted beach, or having sex with someone that I know who's not my spouse, being dominated sexually, having sex with 3 or more people, both men or women, or with a star or well-known persona, or with an unknown person. And then for men, similar, having sex with someone who I know who's not my spouse, having sex with two women, romantic location like a deserted beach, men also like that, watching someone undress without him or her knowing, masturbating an unknown person. So in all of these cases, they put the statistics next to him, and for almost all of these, at least 60% or higher of the people they surveyed mentioned these fantasies. So is there really no deviance or nothing that's really abnormal to fantasize about?
I mean, studies again would say that generally no. Again, as long as it's consenting adults, of course. But no, I mean, also the important thing of fantasies is and I see this in clients who haven't been able to share it, and they get so frustrated and so like anxious about certain things because it's such a deep part of us in a way, right? Sexuality. So I think one of the important things with these fantasies is to have someone that you can talk to,
right?
Have someone that you can share them with. Now, ideally, that would be your sexual partner. But also in therapy, I have found that it helps people to just be able to tell someone.
Right,
and
even if it's a friend or
even if
stranger.
It's a friend, if it's your psychotherapist, if it's, whoever it might be. But just to be able to go, because a lot of the times I get asked, am I crazy? Or am I,
is there something
dirty?
Wrong with
Is something
me?
wrong with me, right? And most of the time these fantasies are very innocent. And like similar to the ones you've read out. So
why is there the shame then associated with them?
With sexual fantasies?
Yeah. As if you're not allowed to have them or you're not supposed to have them.
Well, I think there's always been a little bit of shame around sexuality. I mean, and a lot of people just won't talk about sex, full stop, whether they have so-called deviant fantasies or whether they have the standard missionary position. People don't really talk about sex, and it used to be that it's just for making babies.
True, yes.
And there used to be the whole thing of, women can't really orgasm or women don't really find pleasure. And these are all things that over time we've moved away from those opinions, right? And similarly, things like BDSM are in that category. We're slowly moving away from stigmatizing it, but there's still quite a fair bit to go, which is unfortunate because the stigmatization of it will cause so much shame for people, and that does mess with your mental health ultimately. So.
Yeah, and that people carry that throughout their lifetime and maybe pass it on to their children in their attitudes, etc.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so if somebody wanted to explore BDSM, if maybe they've been thinking about this but have never vocalized it or shared it with anyone, what would be a healthy way to do that?
Well, first of all, seeking that conversation with the partner, assuming they have their partner that they want to try it with, seeking that conversation around sexuality in general. Because if you've never talked to your partner about sexuality, then that's probably not the first step to doing that. But, becoming more comfortable with it. Also becoming comfortable with your own desires and fantasies and understanding, maybe trying them out for yourself. Individually during masturbation can help to get you an idea of what works for you, what doesn't. The two most important things really in a partnership with BDSM is to set the scene, to make sure you start slow and really create a story and look for the feedback from the other person, and then the other thing is obviously safety. Safety is a key element of BDSM. If you're going to tie someone up, know how to untie them. If you're going to use...
Don't throw the key to the padlock.
Exactly. You're going to use handcuffs, know where the key is. These kind of things. Don't put things around people's throats. I mean, it's quite common sense, but it depends, of course, on what your partner's boundaries are as well, because for some people some things might be okay and for others they're not. So that's really important in a conversation, and really it's important in any partnership, isn't it? It's just that BDSM sort of really brings that to the table, because you don't want to be guessing, right?
Exactly.
With your partner, are they going to like this or not? So that conversation should be sought out and clear from the start, which again would be great for any kind of sexual relationship. Actually, any relationship, in fact, absolutely. And it can giving up control or taking the responsibility of control can also very much enhance a bond between two partners. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, Esslin, thank you so much for talking about this so-called taboo topic. We've done it now. It's out there on the air. It's been really interesting, and thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
And